A billionaire CEO notices a homeless boy wearing his missing family necklace. His heart stops. That necklace was buried with his son 10 years ago. The end will shock you. Before we dive in, we'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button to support the channel. Now, sit back, relax, and let the story begin. The gleaming silver pendant caught the sunlight, sending a flash of recognition through Maxwell Harrison's mind as he stepped out of his Bentley. There it was, hanging from the neck of a scrawny boy huddled against the brick wall outside the very restaurant where Maxwell was meeting investors. The intricate dragon design with emerald eyes was unmistakable. The pendant had been in the Harrison family for generations, a symbol of their rise from poverty to power, and it had disappeared the night Maxwell's mansion was broken into 5 years ago. He had offered a substantial reward, hired private investigators, even suspected his own staff, all to no avail. Yet here it was, dangling from the dirt-smudged neck of a homeless child who couldn't be more than 12 years old. Maxwell froze. On the sidewalk, his $5,000 shoes rooted to the concrete as his security detail exchanged confused glances around him. "Sir?" His head of security, Damon, questioned with concern, but Maxwell couldn't tear his eyes away from the necklace, from the boy. The child's eyes were downcast, focused on a half-eaten sandwich someone had tossed his way. His clothes were tattered but clean, as if someone had attempted to maintain dignity despite impossible circumstances. The boy's dark hair hung in his eyes, and his thin fingers clutched the pendant absently, a habit formed from years of holding on to it. Shocked. "Where did you get that necklace?" Maxwell's voice came out sharper than intended, causing the boy's head to snap up in alarm. The child's eyes widened, striking blue eyes that sent another bolt of recognition through Maxwell, though he couldn't place why. The boy clutched the pendant protectively and scrambled to his feet, ready to run. "I didn't steal it," he protested, his voice carrying an accent Maxwell couldn't quite place. "It's mine. My mom gave it to me before she—" He stopped, those blue eyes suddenly glistening with unshed tears. Maxwell felt Damon move beside him, ready to intercept if the boy fled, but Maxwell raised a hand to stop him. There was something about this child, something hauntingly familiar that made Maxwell's chest tighten in a way it hadn't in years. "What's your name?" Maxwell asked, softening his tone as he took a careful step forward. The restaurant door opened behind him, and his assistant Gabby appeared, looking flustered. "Mr. Harrison, the investors are waiting, and Mr. Chen is getting impatient." Maxwell raised his hand again, never taking his eyes off the boy. "Tell them I'll be there shortly. This is important." Gabby hesitated, then nodded and disappeared back inside. The boy watched this exchange with wary eyes, still clutching the pendant. "Lucas," he finally answered, lifting his chin with surprising dignity. "My name is Lucas Ward." Ward. The surname hit Maxwell like a physical blow. Memories flooded. Back of Eliza Ward, the only woman he had ever truly loved, who had walked out of his life 6 years ago after telling him his workaholic tendencies and emotional unavailability made a future together impossible. She had been pregnant, but she had never told him, never given him the chance to be a father. The timing, the boy's age, those familiar blue eyes that were so like Eliza's. Maxwell felt dizzy with the implications. "And your mother?" he asked, carefully, his voice barely audible over the city noise surrounding them. "Where is she now?" Lucas's eyes dropped to the sidewalk, his small shoulders hunching forward. "She died 3 months ago. Cancer." Each word fell between them like stones. "We were living in Europe, but she wanted to come back to New York at the end. She said if anything happened to her, I should find my father." The boy's voice cracked slightly. "But all she gave me was this necklace, and said it belonged to his family. I've been looking, but—" He shrugged hopelessly, How do you find someone when all you have is a necklace? The world around Maxwell seemed to fade into background noise. The missed meetings, the business empire, the fortune he had built. None of it mattered in this moment. This boy, his son, had been living on the streets, alone and searching, while Maxwell had been accumulating more wealth than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. Without thinking, he removed his tailored suit jacket and draped it gently around Lucas's thin shoulders. The boy flinched at first, then relaxed as the warmth enveloped him. "I think," Maxwell said softly, kneeling down despite the expensive fabric of his trousers meeting the dirty sidewalk. "Your search might be over." Damon looked between them, sudden understanding dawning on his face. He had worked for Maxwell long enough to have met Eliza, to recognize the resemblance now revealed. With practiced efficiency, he stepped forward. "Sir, should I have the car brought around? Perhaps we could continue this conversation somewhere more private." Maxwell nodded gratefully, still trying to process the earth-shattering revelation before him. Lucas looked uncertain, clutching the oversized jacket around his shoulders. "How do you know about my necklace?" he asked, suspicion evident in his young voice. "Because," Maxwell said gently, "that necklace has been in my family. For 5 generations, my grandfather gave it to my father, who gave it to me, and He paused, remembering the night he had impulsively given the cherished heirloom to Eliza as a promise of his love, a promise he had failed to keep in all the ways that mattered. "I gave it to your mother." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Lucas's eyes widened, his grip on the pendant tightening as he processed what Maxwell was saying. You're saying you're Your father," Maxwell confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "I think I'm your father, Lucas." The boy's expression was unreadable, a mixture of hope, disbelief, and wariness, all competing for dominance. Maxwell didn't blame him. What kind of father didn't know his son existed? What kind of father left his child to fend for himself on the streets? The shame was overwhelming, but Maxwell pushed it aside. There would be time for self-recrimination later. Right now, this boy needed warmth, food, and safety. The sleek black Bentley pulled up to the curb, and Damon opened the door. Maxwell gestured toward it, careful not to make any sudden movements that might spook the boy. "I know you have no reason to trust me, Lucas, but I'd like to take you somewhere we can talk properly, get you some food, maybe some new clothes, no strings attached. If you want to leave afterward, Damon will take you wherever you want to go." He pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card, holding it out. "You can keep this either way. It has my personal number on it." Lucas hesitated, studying Maxwell's face with an intensity that belied his young age. Finally, he reached out and took the card, tucking it carefully into his pocket. "I am pretty hungry," he admitted, "and I'd like to know more about my mom from before." The simple request nearly broke Maxwell's heart. This child wanted to know about his mother, and Maxwell had years of memories of Eliza he could share. Her laugh, her passion for art, her habit of singing off-key in the shower, how she took her coffee with too much sugar. Inside the Bentley, Lucas sat stiffly, clearly uncomfortable with the luxury surrounding him. Maxwell kept a respectful distance, despite the overwhelming urge to hug this child who shared his blood. "When was the last time you had a proper meal?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Lucas shrugged, tracing the dragon design on the pendant. "The shelter on 42nd serves dinner on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I was there yesterday." The matter-of-fact way he described his hunger made Maxwell's stomach clench with guilt. While he had been dining in Michelin-starred restaurants, his son had been timing his meals around shelter schedules. As the car glided through the Manhattan traffic, Maxwell discreetly texted Gabby, instructing her to reschedule the investor meeting and to prepare the guest suite at his penthouse. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "And find the best pediatrician in the city. We'll need an appointment as soon as possible." He might be 6 years late to fatherhood, but he was determined to make up for lost time. Beside him, Lucas had pressed his face to the window, watching the city pass by with the wonder only a child could muster. "I've never been in a car this fancy," he admitted. "Is it yours?" Hesitant. "It is," Maxwell confirmed, watching the boy's profile. "I own a company called Harrison Innovations. We make technology that helps hospitals treat patients better." It was a simplified version of his multi-billion-dollar medical technology corporation, but it seemed to impress Lucas, whose eyes widened. "My mom was a nurse," he said quietly, "before she got sick. She always wanted to help people." Another piece of information Maxwell hadn't known: Eliza had been studying art history when they'd been together. She must have changed careers after they parted ways. The car pulled into the private underground garage of Maxwell's building, and Lucas tensed again, uncertainty clouding his features. "It's okay," Maxwell reassured him. "My home is upstairs. But we can go somewhere else if you'd prefer." Lucas shook his head, curiosity apparently winning out over caution. "No, I want to see." As they rode the private elevator to the penthouse, Lucas kept glancing at Maxwell, then quickly looking away when caught. "Your building is really tall," he observed. "Can you see the whole city from up there?" "Almost," Maxwell replied with a small smile. "The view is quite something, especially at sunset." The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, revealing a sprawling space of marble, glass, and modern art. Lucas stepped out cautiously, as if afraid his presence might somehow contaminate the pristine surroundings. Maxwell felt a pang, remembering Eliza's criticism that his homes never felt lived in, more like museum exhibits than places of comfort. She had been right. Looking at it through a child's eyes, the space seemed cold, impersonal, lacking the warmth a boy like Lucas clearly needed. "Are you hungry now? I can have something prepared while you freshen up," Maxwell offered, noticing how Lucas kept tugging at his worn clothing self-consciously. The boy nodded, still taking in his surroundings with wide eyes. "Is there somewhere I could wash my hands?" he asked politely, and the simple, proper request made Maxwell's chest ache. Even in the midst of homelessness, someone, Eliza, had taught this boy manners. "Of course," he said, leading Lucas to one of the guest bathrooms. "There are fresh towels on the rack. Take your time. I'll be in the kitchen when you're ready." As Lucas disappeared into the bathroom, Maxwell leaned against the wall, suddenly overwhelmed by the morning's events. His son. He had a son. A son who had been living on the streets while Maxwell accumulated more wealth than any human could reasonably need. A son who had lost his mother and been left completely alone in the world. A son who, by some miracle, or fate, had crossed his path wearing the very necklace that connected them. Maxwell took a shaky breath, trying to compose himself before Lucas returned. He needed to be strong now, to make decisions with a clear head. This child deserved nothing less. In the kitchen, Maxwell instructed the chef who came with the penthouse to prepare something simple but nutritious. "Nothing too rich," he cautioned. "I don't know when he last had a proper meal." The chef, Loran, nodded understandingly, already pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. "Perhaps some chicken soup to start, sir. Gentle on the stomach but nourishing." Maxwell nodded gratefully. "Perfect. And maybe some fresh bread." Loran smiled. "I baked a batch this morning. I'll warm it now." The kitchen itself was a masterpiece of design, all gleaming stainless steel and pristine white marble, with state-of-the-art appliances that Maxwell himself rarely used. Like the rest of the penthouse, it was beautiful, but showed little evidence of being lived in. No magnetic letters on the refrigerator, no children's artwork proudly displayed, no family photos in mismatched frames. All the homey touches that would have existed if Lucas had grown up here from the beginning. Maxwell made a mental note to change that, to make this space reflect the family they were trying to become, not just the wealth he had accumulated. When Lucas emerged from the bathroom, his face and hands were clean, and he had made an attempt to smooth his unruly hair. The oversized suit jacket still hung from his thin shoulders, making him look even smaller than he was. He approached the kitchen island tentatively, climbing onto one of the high stools when Maxwell gestured to it. "It smells good," he said, his stomach audibly rumbling at the aroma of the soup Lauren was preparing. Maxwell smiled, pouring a glass of water for the boy. "Lauren is an excellent chef. He used to work in a 5-star restaurant before I convinced him to cook just for me." Lucas took small, careful sips of the water, as if savoring even this simple refreshment. Why would he want to cook just for one person instead of a whole restaurant? He asked curiously. Maxwell paused, considering the question. It was actually something he'd never thought about before. "I pay him very well," he said finally, though the answer felt inadequate, even to his own ears. Lucas seemed to sense this, too, his expression thoughtful as he watched Lauren work. "But don't you get lonely eating by yourself?" The innocent question struck at the heart of Maxwell's empty existence, a reality he had successfully avoided confronting for years. "I suppose I do," Maxwell admitted softly. "I've gotten used to it, but that doesn't mean it's ideal." Lauren placed a steaming bowl of soup before Lucas, along with a slice of warm bread drizzled with olive oil. "Enjoy, young sir," he said with a kind smile before discreetly retreating to give them privacy. Lucas waited until Maxwell nodded encouragingly, before picking up his spoon and taking a cautious taste. His eyes widened in appreciation, and he took another spoonful with more enthusiasm. "This is amazing," he declared, breaking off a piece of bread to dip into the broth. Maxwell watched him eat, struck by how such a simple pleasure could bring such joy to a child who had clearly gone without for too long. "Lucas," he said gently, "I'd like to ask you some questions if that's okay. About your mother. About what happened after she—" He trailed off, unsure how to delicately phrase the question. Lucas slowed his eating, his expression growing more guarded. "After she died," he finished, with the bluntness only children and the very honest possess. Maxwell nodded, his throat tight. "We were staying in a small apartment in Queens," Lucas explained, tearing off another piece of bread. "Mom had been sick for a while, but it got really bad in the last month. The neighbor lady, Mrs. Patel, would check on us and bring food sometimes. Then one morning, Mom wouldn't wake up." He said this with a detached calm that suggested he was compartmentalizing his grief, something no child should have to do. Mrs. Patel called the ambulance, but they said Mom was already gone. She let me stay with her for a few days, but then her daughter came to visit from India, and there wasn't enough room. The matter-of-fact recounting of events that would traumatize even an adult made Maxwell's heart constrict painfully. "What happened then?" he asked, dreading the answer. Lucas shrugged, focusing intently on his soup. "Mrs. Patel called social services, but I ran away before they came. Mom always said the system was broken, that kids got lost in it." He looked up, a flash of defiance in his blue eyes. "I thought I could find you on my own. Mom said you were important, that you ran a big company in New York. I've been looking at all the big buildings with company names on them." Maxwell couldn't help but feel a surge of pride at the boy's resourcefulness, even as he was horrified by the danger Lucas had put himself in. "How long have you been on your own?" he asked. Lucas considered this, counting on his fingers. "About 2.5 months, I think. It's almost Christmas now, and Mom died in September." 2.5 months. This child had been surviving alone on the streets of New York for 10 weeks, while Maxwell had been making deals and attending galas, completely oblivious. "Were you afraid?" Maxwell asked softly, unable to imagine the courage it must have taken for a child to face the city alone. Lucas hesitated, as if weighing whether to admit vulnerability. Sometimes, he confessed, mostly at night, or when older kids tried to take my stuff. But I found places to hide, and I made friends with some of the other people without homes. He seemed to carefully avoid the word homeless, as if distancing himself from a label that carried such stigma. There's an old man named Bernie, who showed me which shelters were safe and which soup kitchens had the best food, and a lady called Sunshine who gave me an extra blanket when it got cold. The thought of his son relying on the kindness of strangers, other unhoused people who had so little themselves yet shared what they could, made Maxwell's throat constrict with both gratitude and shame. While he had been worrying about market fluctuations and merger negotiations, these people had been looking after his child. "I'd like to thank them," he said earnestly. "Bernie and Sunshine. Maybe we could help them somehow." Lucas looked surprised, then pleased. "Really? Bernie always says he just wants a warm place where no one kicks him out. And Sunshine used to be a teacher before. Something bad happened. She never told me what." "Yes, really," Maxwell confirmed, already making mental notes to have his foundation look into housing options for Lucas's street family. "Anyone who helped you is important to me." The smile that spread across Lucas's face was like sunshine, breaking through clouds, radiant and transformative. It was the first truly unguarded expression Maxwell had seen from him, and it made him look so much like Eliza that Maxwell's heart stuttered in his chest. "You look just like your mother when you smile," he said softly, the words escaping before he could consider them. Lucas's smile faltered, his eyes growing sad again. "People always said that I had Mom's smile and her eyes." He touched the pendant again, a gesture Maxwell was beginning to recognize as a self-soothing habit. "But she said I had my dad's stubbornness and his brains." He looked up, studying Maxwell's face intently. "I don't really look like you, though." There was a question in the statement, a hint of doubt that Maxwell understood completely. This situation was surreal for both of them. "You have my nose," Maxwell offered, pointing to his own straight nose, "and maybe my chin, but mostly you favor your mother, which is a blessing, believe me." This coaxed another small smile from Lucas. "But your mother was right about the stubbornness. And the brains, I hope. I was always at the top of my class in school." He didn't mention the scholarships that had pulled him out of poverty, the relentless drive that had pushed him to Harvard and then to founding his own company. There would be time for those stories later. "Lucas," Maxwell said, leaning forward, slightly, "I want you to know that you don't have to look anymore. If you want, and only if you want, you can stay here with me. I'm your father, and I should have been there for you from the beginning." He swallowed hard, forcing himself to continue. "I didn't know about you. Your mother and I. We parted ways before she knew she was pregnant. But that's no excuse. I should have checked on her, should have made sure she was okay." The boy regarded him thoughtfully, still clutching the silver pendant. "Mom said you were too busy changing the world to have time for a family," he said without accusation, simply stating what he had been told. "She said you weren't a bad person, just focused on different things." The charitable assessment Eliza had given him was more than Maxwell deserved, and he knew it. "She was right," he admitted. "I was focused on building my company, on being successful. I thought there would be time later for everything else." He gestured around the penthouse. "I built all this, but I missed what really mattered." Lucas finished his soup, pushing the empty bowl away with a satisfied sigh. "This is a really nice place," he offered, clearly trying to be polite. Maxwell smiled ruefully. "It's big and expensive, but your mother would say it lacks heart. She always teased me about my modern furniture, said it was like living in a spaceship." Lucas giggled at this, a sound so unexpected and delightful that Maxwell felt his own smile widen in response. She kept our apartment full of colorful things, Lucas shared. Paintings and weird lamps and pillows with tassels that got caught in my hair when I fell asleep on the couch. The image of Eliza's eclectic decorating style was so vivid, so perfectly her, that Maxwell felt his eyes sting with unexpected tears. He blinked them away quickly, not wanting to upset Lucas. Your mother had wonderful taste, he said. Unconventional, but wonderful. This place could use some of that warmth. He hesitated, then added, Perhaps you could help me with that, if you decide to stay. Lucas's expression grew serious again. I can't pay rent, he said worriedly. I only have $17.32. Maxwell felt his heart breaking all over again at the earnestness in the boy's voice. Lucas, he said gently, you would never, ever have to pay to live with me. I'm your father. Taking care of you is my responsibility, and my privilege. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. There are legal things we'll need to sort out. Tests to confirm what I already believe to be true. Paperwork to establish guardianship. But none of that changes the fact that I want you here, if you want to stay. The boy fidgeted with the pendant again, a nervous habit that Maxwell was beginning to recognize. What if I'm not a good son? He asked in a small voice. What if I do something wrong or break something expensive? The vulnerability in the question made Maxwell want to gather this child in his arms and promise him the world, but he restrained himself, sensing that Lucas wasn't ready for such gestures yet. Lucas, he said firmly, there is nothing you could do that would make me send you away. Being a family means accepting each other, flaws and all. And between us, he leaned in conspiratorially, I'm far more likely to make mistakes as a father than you are as a son. This earned him another small smile from Lucas, who seemed to be warming to the idea. Could I go to school? He asked, hesitantly. I've missed a lot. Mom homeschooled me when she was well enough, but Maxwell nodded immediately. Absolutely. The best school we can find. And tutors to help you catch up if you need them. He paused, then added, What subjects do you like best? Science, Lucas answered without hesitation. Especially astronomy. Mom and I used to look at stars through this old telescope we had. And I like reading. Mom said I read at a high school level, even though I'm only 11. Pride shone in his eyes as he shared this achievement, and Maxwell felt an answering pride swell within his own chest. His son was intelligent, curious, traits that would serve him well in life. That's impressive, Maxwell said sincerely. Perhaps we could visit the planetarium at the Natural History Museum sometime. And I have quite a library here that you're welcome to explore. For the first time, genuine excitement flickered across Lucas's face. Really? The planetarium? I've always wanted to go there. The simple wish, so easy for Maxwell to grant, reminded him of how little this child had been given in life. He made a silent vow then and there. Lucas would want for nothing from this day forward. Not material things, though Maxwell would certainly provide those, but the more important things, stability, education, encouragement, and most of all, love. Really, Maxwell confirmed with a smile. We can go whenever you like, tomorrow even, if you're feeling up to it. He hesitated, then added, But first I was thinking we might need to get you some new clothes, and perhaps see a doctor, just to make sure you're healthy after. He trailed off, not wanting to explicitly reference the boy's time on the streets. Lucas tensed slightly at the mention of a doctor, but nodded reluctantly. Mom always said checkups were important, he admitted, but doctors are expensive. You don't need to worry about that, Maxwell assured him. I have excellent health. Insurance through my company, and I can add you to my plan immediately. He didn't mention that he could buy an entire hospital if necessary. That kind of talk would only intimidate Lucas, who was clearly still adjusting to the idea of his father's wealth. For now, though, I was thinking you might like to rest. I've had a guest room prepared, but if you'd prefer, we could go shopping first and get you settled afterward." Lucas stifled a yawn, clearly trying to appear more alert than he felt. "Maybe rest first?" he suggested tentatively. "If that's okay." Maxwell nodded, standing from his stool. "Of course. Follow me." He led Lucas through the penthouse to a spacious guest suite that Gabby had hastily prepared. The room was tastefully decorated in neutral tones, with a king-sized bed that would dwarf Lucas's small frame. "The bathroom is through that door," Maxwell explained, pointing. "Fresh towels, toothbrush, everything you might need. And Gabby took the liberty of leaving some clothes that might fit you better than mine." He gestured to a stack of neatly folded items on the dresser. "They won't be perfect, but they'll do until we can go shopping." Lucas approached the bed cautiously, reaching out to touch the plush comforter with wonder. "This is all for me?" he asked, clearly overwhelmed by the space and luxury. Maxwell nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "All for you. And if you don't like anything about it, the colors, the bedding, anything at all, we can change it. Make it more your own." Lucas sat on the edge of the bed, bouncing slightly to test its softness. A small, tired smile crossed his face. "It's perfect," he declared. "I haven't slept in a real bed since—" His voice faltered. "I know," Maxwell said softly. "Get some rest, Lucas. I'll be in my office down the hall if you need anything at all. Anything. Just come find me or call out. I'll hear you." He moved toward the door, sensing that the boy needed space to process all that had happened. "Thank you," Lucas said suddenly, "for the food and the room and for wanting me." The simple gratitude for what should have been. His birthright made Maxwell's heart ache anew. "No, Lucas," he said firmly. "Thank you for finding me, for giving me a chance to be your father. I'm the lucky one here." As Maxwell closed the door quietly behind him, leaving it slightly ajar, in case Lucas called for him, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders even as a new responsibility settled firmly in its place. For years he had chased success, believing it would fill the emptiness Eliza had left behind. Now he understood what had been missing all along. Not just Eliza, but the family they could have been. The father he should have been to this remarkable child who had somehow found his way home against impossible odds. In his office, Maxwell made the calls that would reorganize his life around his newfound son. He canceled meetings, rescheduled trips, and instructed his legal team to begin the process of establishing paternity and formal guardianship. He contacted the best pediatrician in Manhattan, who agreed to make a house call that evening as a personal favor. He arranged for a child psychologist to be available for consultation, understanding that Lucas had experienced trauma that would need professional attention. And finally, he called Randy Mitchell, his oldest friend and the company's CFO. "Max, everything okay? Gabby said you missed the Chen meeting. That's not like you." Randy's concerned voice came through the speakerphone. Maxwell leaned back in his chair, still processing the surreal turn his life had taken in the span of a few hours. "I'm fine, Randy. Better than fine, actually. But I need to take some time off. A month, maybe more." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. In 15 years of running Harrison Innovations, Maxwell had never taken more than a week away from the office. "Are you dying?" Randy asked bluntly. "Because that's the only explanation I can think of for Maxwell Harrison voluntarily stepping away from his empire." Maxwell laughed, surprising himself with the genuine joy that bubbled up from within. "Not dying. Just the opposite. I'm finally starting to live, I think." He hesitated, then decided his friend deserved the truth. "I have a son, Randy. A son I never knew about until today. Eliza's son." Another stunned silence, followed by a low whistle. "Eliza Ward? The artist you were crazy about back when we were still working out of your garage?" Maxwell confirmed this, then briefly explained the morning's events, ending with Lucas now asleep. in the guest suite. That's incredible, Max, Randy finally said, his voice thick with emotion. A nephew. I have a nephew. The immediate acceptance and enthusiasm warmed Maxwell's heart. Randy had been like a brother to him for decades. Of course, he would consider Lucas family too. He's amazing, Randy. Smart, resilient, polite, despite everything he's been through. I want to do right by him. I need to do right by him. His voice grew serious. Can you handle things at the office? Take point with the Chen deal. I'll be available for emergencies, but otherwise... Say no more, Randy interrupted firmly. Take all the time you need. The company won't fall apart without you hovering over every decision for a few weeks. His tone softened. This is what matters, Max. This kid, your son, he's what matters. The rest is just details. Maxwell thanked him, promising to introduce them soon, and ended the call. Randy was right. For too long, Maxwell had treated the company as his child, his legacy. Now he had a real legacy, one far more precious than any business empire. Hours later, as evening settled over the city, the pediatrician, Dr. Sophia Reyes, confirmed what Maxwell had suspected. Lucas was underweight and slightly anemic, but otherwise in remarkably good health considering his circumstances. He's a resilient young man, she told Maxwell privately after examining Lucas. Physically, he just needs good nutrition and regular meals. Emotionally, she hesitated. He's experienced significant trauma, Mr. Harrison. The loss of his mother, homelessness, the uncertainty of his future. He's handling it with remarkable composure, but children often internalize their struggles. I'd recommend the therapist we discussed, someone who specializes in childhood grief and trauma. Maxwell nodded, absorbing this advice with the same serious attention he gave to business analysts and market forecasts. I'll arrange it, whatever he needs. Dr. Reyes smiled approvingly. He also needs stability, routine, patience. Children who have experienced upheaval often fear that their new situation is temporary, that they could lose everything again in an instant. She packed her medical bag, adding, "Give him time. Let him set the pace for your relationship. And remember that it's okay to not know all the answers. Parenthood doesn't come with a manual, even for billionaires." After she left, Maxwell found Lucas in the library, already exploring the shelves with quiet fascination. He had changed into the clothes Gabby had provided, a simple t-shirt and sweatpants that hung loosely on his thin frame, but were a vast improvement over his previous attire. The silver pendant still gleamed against his chest, a connecting thread between his past and present. "Find anything interesting?" Maxwell asked, leaning against the doorframe. Lucas held up a book on the solar system, his eyes bright with interest. "This one has amazing pictures of Saturn's rings. Did you know they're made mostly of ice particles? Some as small as dust and others as big as houses?" Maxwell smiled, entering the room to sit in one of the leather armchairs. "I didn't know that, actually. What else does it say?" For the next hour they sat together as Lucas enthusiastically shared facts about planets and stars, his earlier wariness temporarily forgotten in the excitement of new knowledge. Maxwell listened attentively, asking questions that made Lucas beam with pride as he answered. This, Maxwell realized, was what fatherhood was about. These simple moments of connection, of shared wonder at the universe. As the evening progressed, they ordered pizza at Lucas's shy request. "It's been so long since I had pizza." Watched a documentary about space exploration. Is it really possible to send people to Mars in our lifetime? And began the tentative process of getting to know one another. Maxwell learned that Lucas was allergic to strawberries, loved dogs, but had never had one, and could solve a Rubik's Cube in under 3 minutes. Lucas discovered that his father had never read Harry Potter, couldn't cook anything more complicated than scrambled eggs, and had once wanted to be an astronaut himself before the business world called to him. "Why did you give Mom the necklace?" Lucas asked suddenly, as they sat on the balcony watching the city lights twinkle like earthbound stars. Maxwell touched his own neck reflexively, feeling the absence of the pendant he had worn for most of his life. "Because I loved her," he answered honestly. "And because, in my family, that necklace has always been given to the person you want to spend your life with. My grandmother gave it to my grandfather when he proposed to her, breaking tradition. My father gave it to my mother, and I gave it to yours." Lucas considered this, his fingers absently tracing the dragon's outline. "But you didn't spend your life with her," he pointed out with a child's direct logic. Maxwell nodded, accepting the gentle accusation. "No, I didn't, and that's the biggest mistake I ever made." He looked out at the skyline, gathering his thoughts. "I thought building my company was more important than building a life with her. I worked too much, canceled too many dates, missed too many important moments. By the time I realized what I was losing, she had already decided she deserved better." He looked back at Lucas, meeting his curious gaze. "And she did deserve better. You both did." "She wasn't angry at you," Lucas offered unexpectedly. "Sometimes she'd look at old pictures and get sad, but she never said bad things about you. She told me my father was brilliant and determined, that he was changing healthcare for the better." His brow furrowed in concentration as he recalled her words. "She said loving someone doesn't always mean you can be with them, and that sometimes paths go in different directions even when they start at the same place." Maxwell was stunned by the wisdom Eliza had imparted to their son, by her generosity in portraying him positively despite his failures. "Your mother," he said softly, "was the most extraordinary woman I've ever known, and she raised an extraordinary son." He hesitated, then added, "I wish I had known her decisions. About the pregnancy. About you. Not because I would have tried to change her mind about our relationship, she was right to leave, but because I would have wanted to be part of your life, Lucas, from the very beginning." The boy yawned, the eventful day finally catching up with him. "I'm glad I found you now," he said simply. Maxwell stood, recognizing the signs of exhaustion in Lucas's drooping shoulders. "Time for bed, I think. We have a big day tomorrow. Shopping. The planetarium. Maybe even looking at schools if you're feeling up to it." Lucas stood as well, swaying slightly with tiredness. Without thinking, Maxwell placed a steadying hand on his shoulder, and to his surprise, Lucas didn't pull away. "Will you still be here when I wake up?" Lucas asked as they walked back inside, the question revealing the fear that still lingered beneath his calm exterior. Maxwell stopped, turning to face his son directly. "I will be here when you wake up tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day after that for as long as you need me," he promised solemnly. "This is your home now, Lucas, for as long as you want it to be." That night, as Lucas slept in his new room across the hall, Maxwell sat on his own balcony, nursing a glass of scotch and trying to process the earthquake that had shaken his carefully constructed world. He pulled up old photos of Eliza on his phone, her laughing at a picnic they'd had in Central Park, her concentrated expression as she painted in her studio apartment, her sleepy smile on the rare mornings he hadn't rushed off to work. He had assumed, when she walked away, that the wound would heal with time. It never had. And now, through an almost unbelievable twist of fate, he had been given a second chance, not to rekindle what he had lost with Eliza, but to honor her memory by being the father their son deserved. His phone buzzed with a text from Randy. "Just ordered the most ridiculous amount of toys from Amazon. Hope the kid likes Lego and science kits, and pretty much everything else an 11-year-old boy could want. Uncle Randy privileges activated. Try and stop me." Maxwell chuckled, typing back a mock stern warning not to spoil Lucas too much while feeling profoundly grateful for his friend's immediate and wholehearted acceptance. Lucas needed more than just one person in his corner. He needed a village, a family in the broadest sense of the word. And Maxwell was determined to give him that. The next morning, Maxwell woke early, a lifetime habit he couldn't break even on weekends. He moved quietly through the penthouse, not wanting to disturb Lucas, who needed rest more than routine. To his surprise, he found the boy already awake, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, carefully examining the silver pendant in the morning light that streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Good morning," Maxwell said softly, not wanting to startle him. "You're up early." Lucas looked up, offering a shy smile that was already becoming more frequent. "I always wake up early. Mom said I got that from her side of the family. Her dad was a baker who got up at 4 every morning." Another piece of family history Maxwell hadn't known, another connection to a past that was slowly being revealed. "I'm an early riser too," he admitted, "though in my case it's probably more habit than genetics." "Coffee?" Lucas wrinkled his nose. "Mom let me try it once. It was gross." Maxwell laughed, heading toward the kitchen. "Fair enough. Hot chocolate then? I'm sure Lauren can whip some up." Lucas's eyes lit up. "With marshmallows?" he asked hopefully, following Maxwell to the kitchen. "If we have them," Maxwell promised, though he doubted his health-conscious chef kept many sweets on hand. To his surprise, Lauren, who was already preparing breakfast, produced not only marshmallows but also whipped cream and chocolate shavings. "I took the liberty of ordering a few child-friendly items yesterday evening, sir," he explained with a wink to Lucas, whose eyes widened at the feast being assembled before him. Over breakfast, hot chocolate with all the trimmings for Lucas, black coffee for Maxwell, and Belgian waffles for both. They discussed plans for the day. "I thought, we might go shopping first," Maxwell suggested. "Get you some clothes and whatever else you need. Then perhaps the planetarium this afternoon?" Lucas nodded enthusiastically, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. I've never been shopping in fancy stores," he confessed. "I don't know how to act." The innocent concern touched Maxwell deeply. "There's no special way to act," he assured the boy. "And if anyone treats you with anything less than complete respect, we'll take our business elsewhere." He leaned in, adding in a conspirator's whisper, "Besides, between you and me, I find most high-end retail experiences thoroughly pretentious. We'll make it fun, I promise." This earned him a giggle from Lucas, a sound that was becoming Maxwell's favorite melody. As they were preparing to leave, Gabby arrived with an enormous gift basket in her arms, nearly obscuring her petite frame. "Special delivery from Randy," she announced, setting it down on the coffee table. "He said, and I quote, 'Every kid needs the basics to start a new life,' though I'm not sure most people would consider a professional-grade telescope a basic necessity." The basket was overflowing with books, games, a tablet preloaded with educational apps, the aforementioned telescope, and a plush dragon that bore a striking resemblance to the pendant Lucas wore. Lucas approached the basket with wide-eyed wonder, reaching out tentatively to touch the dragon. Is this all for me?" he asked, clearly overwhelmed. Maxwell nodded, smiling at his friend's characteristic generosity. "From your Uncle Randy. You'll meet him soon. He's very excited about having a nephew." Lucas picked up the dragon, hugging it to his chest in an unguarded moment of childlike joy. "I've never had so many presents before," he admitted softly. "Not even at Christmas." A lump formed in Maxwell's throat. "Well," he managed, "I have a feeling this will be a Christmas to remember." He hadn't even thought about the holiday, now just weeks away. For years, Christmas had been just another day for him, perhaps marked by an obligatory company party, but nothing more. Now suddenly he found himself mentally planning decorations, gifts, traditions they could start together. "Do you think," Lucas began hesitantly, still clutching the dragon, "do you think we could get a real Christmas tree? Mom and I always wanted one, but our apartment was too small." "Absolutely," Maxwell assured him without hesitation. "The biggest one we can fit in here, and whatever decorations you like." The smile that lit up Lucas's face was worth more than any deal Maxwell had ever closed. any profit margin he had ever achieved. It was a moment of pure, uncomplicated happiness, the first of many, he hoped, in their new life together. The shopping expedition proved less traumatic than Lucas had feared. Maxwell chose smaller boutiques over intimidating department stores and salespeople who cooed over Mr. Harrison's son rather than those who might have raised eyebrows at the obvious class disparity between them. By lunchtime, Lucas had a complete wardrobe. Everything from everyday clothes to a small suit for formal occasions that made him look heartbreakingly grown up. Maxwell had insisted on practical items as well as fun ones, making sure Lucas knew that both were equally important. "Can we get something for Bernie and Sunshine too?" Lucas asked as they were loading shopping bags into the car. Maxwell paused, touched by the boy's thoughtfulness, even in the midst of his own good fortune. "Of course. What do you think they would like?" Lucas considered this carefully. "Bernie always says his feet hurt. Maybe good shoes? And Sunshine is always reading old paperbacks. Maybe some new books?" Simple requests, easily granted, that would make a world of difference to people who had shown kindness to his son when he had nothing. They added boots, warm socks, and a gift card to a local diner for Bernie, and a selection of books, and a warm coat for Sunshine. "We can take these to them tomorrow, if you'd like," Maxwell suggested as they headed toward the Natural History Museum. "You can introduce me." Lucas nodded, though a shadow crossed his face. They might not be easy to find. People without homes move around a lot, sometimes because they want to, sometimes because police make them. There was knowledge in his voice that no child should possess, experience gained at far too young an age. "We'll find them," Maxwell promised, making a mental note to have his foundation look into the homeless situation in the city more broadly. He had always made charitable donations, of course, substantial ones that generated good press and tax benefits, but he had never engaged with the issue on a personal level. Now, seeing it through Lucas's eyes, he couldn't ignore the human cost of the problem. These weren't just statistics. They were people like Bernie and Sunshine, who had protected his son when he couldn't. The planetarium was everything Lucas had hoped for, and more. Maxwell watched in delight as his son's face lifted toward the domed ceiling, illuminated by the projected stars and planets. The wonder in his expression, the rapid-fire questions he asked the museum guide, the way he unconsciously reached for Maxwell's hand during the simulated spaceflight, all of it filled a void in Maxwell's heart he hadn't even realized existed. This, he thought, was what it meant to be a father. Not just providing food and shelter, but witnessing the moments of discovery, the expansion of a young mind, encountering new ideas and possibilities. As they exited the museum, Lucas chattering excitedly about what they had learned, Maxwell's phone rang. He checked the caller ID, his lead counsel, Thomas Blackwell, and was about to silence it when Lucas said, "You can answer it. It might be important business stuff." The consideration in the offer made Maxwell smile. "Nothing is more important than our day together," he said firmly, silencing the phone. "Thomas can leave a message if it's urgent." The simple action, choosing his son over work, felt momentous, a reversal of priorities that would have been unthinkable just a day earlier. But as they walked down the museum steps, Lucas pointing out a hawk circling overhead, Maxwell realized it wasn't a sacrifice at all. The joy of this moment far outweighed any business concern, any deal or contract or meeting. For the first time in his adult life, Maxwell Harrison was exactly where he wanted to be, doing exactly what he wanted to do. That evening, after a dinner of Lucas's choosing, burgers and milkshakes from a famous local joint delivered to the penthouse, they sat together on the sofa, looking through photo albums Maxwell had dug out of storage. "This is your mother at the gallery opening where we first met," he explained, pointing to a photo of a younger Eliza, radiant in a vintage dress, standing beside one of her paintings. She was the most beautiful woman in the room and the smartest. Everyone else was talking about market value and investment potential. She was talking about how art should make you feel something, change something inside you. Lucas traced his mother's face in the photo reverently. She kept painting, you know. Not as much after she became a nurse, but still sometimes. Our apartment had her pictures everywhere. He looked up at Maxwell, his expression suddenly urgent. Do you think we could go there? To our old apartment? There might still be some of her paintings. And my stuff. My books and science projects and... He trailed off, clearly thinking of treasured possessions left behind in his flight from social services. Of course we can, Maxwell assured him immediately. First thing tomorrow. I'll have the legal team sort out whatever is needed to access the apartment. Lucas relaxed visibly, leaning unconsciously against Maxwell's side as they continued to flip through photos. This was our trip to Italy, Maxwell explained, pointing to a picture of himself and Eliza on a Venetian gondola. Your mother insisted. We had to see the art in person, not just in books. She was right, of course, she usually was. As the evening wore on, Lucas grew sleepy, his head nodding against Maxwell's shoulder. When Maxwell suggested it was bedtime, Lucas didn't protest, but as they reached his bedroom door, he asked hesitantly, Would you read to me? Mom always did, even when I could read by myself. She said it was our special time. Maxwell felt his heart swell with both grief for what Lucas had lost and determination to honor Eliza's parenting traditions. I'd love to, he said sincerely. What shall we read? Lucas pulled a book from the stack Randy had sent, the first Harry Potter novel. Mom and I never finished this one, he explained. She got too sick halfway through. The simple statement, delivered with such matter-of-fact acceptance, reminded Maxwell again of all this child had endured. Then we'll start from the beginning, he promised, settling into the chair beside Lucas's bed as the boy snuggled under the covers, still clutching the plush dragon. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Lived. Later, after Lucas had fallen asleep, Maxwell stood in the doorway of his son's room, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest. The enormity of the responsibility he had undertaken was daunting, but also exhilarating. He had built a business empire from scratch, had overcome poverty and adversity to become one of the wealthiest men in the country. But nothing in his life had ever felt as important, as meaningful, as the task before him now, being a father to this remarkable child who had already endured more than most adults. As he quietly closed Lucas's door, leaving it slightly ajar, Maxwell whispered a silent promise to Eliza. He would love their son fiercely, protect him vigilantly, and raise him to be a man who understood that true wealth had nothing to do with money and everything to do with compassion, curiosity, and connection. He had failed Eliza in life, but he would not fail her in this sacred trust. Lucas would grow up knowing that both his parents had loved him, in their own imperfect human ways. In his office, Maxwell listened to Thomas Blackwell's message. Something about the Chen deal and potential regulatory concerns. It could wait. Instead, he opened his laptop and began a different kind of work, researching the best schools for Lucas, child psychologists specializing in grief and trauma, and programs for gifted young scientists. He created folders for housing initiatives that might help people like Bernie and Sunshine. He looked into the possibility of establishing a scholarship fund in Eliza's name for aspiring nurses who, like her, had changed careers to help others. Penthouse, usually silent except for the occasional phone call or news broadcast, now hummed with a different kind of energy. The presence of a child, the beginning of a family. Maxwell glanced at the photo of Eliza he kept on his desk, her smile forever frozen in time. Thank you, he whispered to the empty room. For our son, for finding your way back to me through him. It wasn't the life they had planned together, but perhaps it was the one they were meant to have all along. The next morning, they visited Lucas's old apartment in Queens, a modest two-bedroom in a weathered building. The landlord, apologetic and clearly intimidated by Maxwell's obvious wealth, explained that he had been holding Eliza's things until the end of the month out of respect, but had been planning to clear the apartment soon. Mrs. Ward was a good tenant, he explained. Always paid on time even when she got sick. Never complained about anything. And the boy, he nodded toward Lucas, who was already moving through the apartment, touching familiar objects with a mixture of joy and grief. He was always so polite. I was worried when he disappeared. Glad to see he's okay. Maxwell thanked the man, pressing several months' worth of rent into his hand to compensate for the inconvenience. Inside, the apartment was exactly as Lucas had described. Small but warm, filled with color and art and evidence of a loving home. Eliza's paintings hung on every wall, vibrant abstracts and delicate landscapes that spoke of her talent and vision. Lucas's room was a shrine to his interests, star charts on the ceiling, bookshelves overflowing with science texts and fantasy novels, a half-completed model of the solar system on his desk. We'll take it all, Maxwell decided, watching Lucas move from object to object, collecting treasured possessions with careful hands. Every painting, every book, everything you want to keep. He arranged for professional movers to pack everything, with care, to be delivered to the penthouse that afternoon. As they were leaving, Lucas paused in the doorway, looking back at the small apartment that had been his home. "Do you think Mom would be okay with me living with you?" he asked quietly. "She never said anything bad about you, but she never tried to find you either." Maxwell knelt beside his son, meeting his worried gaze. "I think your mother wanted what was best for you," he said carefully. "And at the time, that might have meant raising you on her own. But I also think that if she could see us now, she would be happy that we found each other." He touched the silver pendant at Lucas's neck. "She kept this, gave it to you, told you it belonged to your father's family. That tells me she wanted you to know me someday, when the time was right." Lucas considered this, then nodded, seemingly satisfied with the explanation. "I think she'd like that you read Harry Potter to me," he offered. "She always said people can change, like the characters in books, that nobody stays the same forever." Out of the mouths of babes, Maxwell thought, marveling at the wisdom in the simple observation. People did change. He had changed more in 24 hours than in the previous decade. His priorities and perspectives shifted by the presence of this child in his life. As they headed back to the car, Lucas spotted a familiar figure huddled on a bench in the small park across from the apartment building. "Bernie!" he called excitedly, tugging Maxwell's hand. "That's Bernie!" Maxwell followed as Lucas raced toward an elderly man wrapped in layers of worn clothing, a weather-beaten face lifting in surprise at the sound of his name. "Lucas?" the man questioned, his voice rough but warm. "Is that really you, stargazer?" The reunion that followed brought tears to Maxwell's eyes, the genuine joy in Bernie's face as Lucas explained what had happened, the careful way the old man patted Lucas's shoulder as if he might break, the concern in his questions about whether Lucas was safe and happy. Here was a man with nothing, who had still found room in his heart to care for a lost child. Maxwell approached respectfully, extending his hand. "Mr. Bernie," he said formally, "I understand I owe you a debt I can never repay. You looked after my son when I couldn't." Bernie's handshake was firm despite his frail appearance, his gaze direct and assessing. "He's a good kid," he said simply. "Smart as they come. Deserves better than the streets." He glanced at Lucas, who was eagerly showing him the new clothes he was wearing. "Looks like he found it." There was no resentment in his voice, no jealousy, just genuine happiness for the boy's good fortune. Maxwell was humbled by the generosity of spirit. "Lucas chose some things for you," Maxwell said, gesturing toward the car where Damon was retrieving the packages they had purchased. "And I was hoping we might talk about how I can help you as well. Not charity," he added quickly, seeing the pride that straightened Bernie's hunched shoulders. "But perhaps an opportunity, a job, housing, whatever you might need." The conversation that followed revealed that Bernie had once been a skilled carpenter before a workplace injury, and lack of insurance had started his downward spiral. He didn't want handouts, he explained firmly, but he wasn't too proud to accept help getting back on his feet. Maxwell arranged for him to meet with the head of his foundation's housing initiative the following day and extracted a promise that Bernie would join them for dinner soon. "Lucas would never forgive me if I let you slip away," Maxwell explained with a smile. "You're important to him, which means you're important to me." As they drove away, Lucas waved to Bernie until he was out of sight. "Do you really think you can help him?" he asked, hope and skepticism warring in his young voice. Maxwell nodded firmly. "I do. It might take time, and ultimately it will be Bernie's choice what kind of help he accepts. But I have resources and connections that can open doors." He paused, then added honestly, "I can't solve all the problems in the world, Lucas. But I can try to make a difference for the people who matter to us." The afternoon was spent integrating Lucas's belongings into the penthouse, hanging Eliza's paintings alongside Maxwell's more sterile modern art, creating a proper bedroom that reflected Lucas's personality rather than a designer's vision, setting up a dedicated space for science projects and experiments. By evening, the sleek minimalist apartment had been transformed, warmed by the addition of color and life and the personal touches that had been missing for so long. As they ate dinner, Laurent had prepared Lucas's favorite pasta dish following a recipe they had found in Eliza's kitchen. Maxwell marveled at how completely his life had changed in just 2 days. The penthouse felt like a home for the first time. His phone, usually buzzing constantly with messages and calls, sat silent and ignored on the counter. His thoughts, typically consumed by market trends and business strategies, were focused entirely on the boy sitting across from him, animatedly describing the science project he wanted to start. "And then we could measure the effects of different light wavelengths on plant growth," Lucas was explaining, his earlier shyness giving way to excitement. "Mom and I did a small version, but we only had a few plants. With more space, we could try different species, control for more variables." He hesitated, suddenly uncertain. "That is, if it's okay to use part of the balcony for the experiment?" "The balcony, the living room, whatever space you need," Maxwell assured him without hesitation. "This is your home now, Lucas. Your ideas and projects are welcome here." The smile that bloomed across Lucas's face was worth every square foot of multi-million-dollar real estate he was willing to sacrifice to science experiments. In that moment, Maxwell made another silent promise to himself. He would never be too busy for Lucas's questions, never too preoccupied to engage with his son's curiosity about the world. After dinner, as they were settling in for another chapter of Harry Potter, Maxwell's phone rang again, this time a video call from Randy. He answered it, angling the screen so Lucas could see as well. "There he is!" Randy exclaimed, his familiar face splitting into a wide grin. "The famous nephew I've been hearing so much about. Lucas, it's great to meet you, buddy. I'm your Uncle Randy, your dad's oldest friend and the one who's going to teach you all his bad habits when he's not looking." Lucas giggled, immediately warming to Randy's easy charm. "Uncle Randy sent you the telescope and the dragon," Maxwell explained, though Lucas had already guessed the connection. "And apparently every other toy in Manhattan." Randy shrugged unapologetically. "What's the point of being a billionaire if you can't spoil your godson?" The casual bestowing of the title made Maxwell pause, looking at his friend with a raised eyebrow. Randy grinned back, unrepentant. "Just putting it out there. I call dibs on godfather duties." The conversation that followed was easy and warm, Randy drawing Lucas out with questions about his interests and jokes that made the boy laugh. By the time they ended the call, plans had been made for Randy to join them for dinner the following evening, and Lucas was visibly excited about meeting his uncle in person. "I like him," Lucas declared as Maxwell set the phone aside. "He's funny, and he doesn't talk to me like I'm a baby." "Randy has always been good with people," Maxwell agreed. "Much better than I am, honestly. He's the heart of the company. I'm just the brain." Lucas considered this, head tilted thoughtfully. I think you have a heart too, he decided. You just didn't know how to use it before. The simple assessment, delivered without judgment or rancor, struck Maxwell as profoundly true. He had built walls around his heart after Eliza left, had channeled all his energy into work and wealth accumulation. Lucas had breached those walls with nothing more than a silver pendant and those blue eyes, so like his mother's. Over the days that followed, they established routines and rituals that gave structure to their new life together. Mornings began with breakfast together, often joined by Gabby, who had appointed herself Lucas's unofficial aunt and educational coordinator. Afterward, while Maxwell handled unavoidable work responsibilities from his home office, Lucas worked with the tutors they had hired to assess his educational needs and help him catch up on the schooling he had missed. Afternoons were reserved for father-son activities, museum visits, bookstore explorations, and once, memorably, a cooking lesson from Loran that ended with flour covering every surface of the kitchen and both Harrison men laughing until their sides hurt. Evenings brought dinner, often with guests. Randy became a regular fixture, as did Dr. Reyes, who had moved from professional capacity to family friend. Bernie joined them twice a week, gradually shedding his initial discomfort with the luxurious surroundings as he came to understand that he was valued for himself, not as a charity case. The foundation had found him an apartment and a position teaching carpentry skills to at-risk youth, roles that had returned the pride to his bearing and the sparkle to his eyes. They found sunshine as well, a former elementary school teacher named Clara Johnson, who had lost her job, then her home, after a mental health crisis left her unable to work. With proper medication, therapy, and the stability of a safe place to live, she was slowly reclaiming her life and had begun volunteering at a women's shelter where her teaching skills were deeply appreciated. She joined their growing family circle for Sunday dinners, always bringing books for Lucas and gentle encouragement for his studies. The legal processes moved forward, paternity confirmed, guardianship established, Lucas's place in Maxwell's, life secured by every document the law required. School applications were submitted and accepted, a prestigious private academy with an exceptional science program offering Lucas a place for the spring semester. Christmas approached, bringing with it the promised tree, so tall it barely fit in even the penthouse's high ceilings, decorations chosen by Lucas with input from everyone in their expanding circle, and plans for a holiday celebration that would bring them all together. One evening, 2 weeks after their fateful meeting, Maxwell found Lucas sitting on the balcony, stargazing through the telescope Randy had given him. The silver pendant gleamed against his chest, catching the moonlight as he adjusted the focus. "See anything interesting up there?" Maxwell asked, joining him with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Lucas nodded, moving aside so Maxwell could look through the eyepiece. "That's Jupiter," he explained. "You can see 3 of its moons tonight. They're like a little family, all orbiting together." Maxwell smiled at the analogy, settling into the chair beside his son. "A family," he repeated softly. "Like ours." Lucas nodded, taking a sip of his hot chocolate. "It's different than I thought it would be," he admitted. "When Mom told me to find you, I thought maybe you'd give me money for food or help me find a foster home or something. I never thought—" He gestured around them, at the home they were creating together. "I never thought either," Maxwell acknowledged. "If you had asked me 3 weeks ago what my life would look like today, I couldn't have imagined any of this. But now I can't imagine it any other way." It was true. The workaholic CEO who had once measured success in dollars and deals now found his greatest joy in helping with homework, in listening to elaborate explanations of scientific principles, in the simple act of reading a bedtime story to a child who was slowly, cautiously beginning to trust that this new life was real and permanent. Lucas was quiet for a moment, his gaze returning to the stars. "Do you think Mom can see us?" he asked softly. "From wherever she is now?" It was a question Maxwell had been waiting for, one he had prepared himself to answer honestly. "I don't know for certain," he said carefully. "But I like to think she can, and I think she'd be happy with what she saw. You, safe and thriving. Us, becoming a family. The necklace that once connected her and me now connecting all three of us across time and space." Lucas nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. He reached up to touch the pendant, a gesture that had evolved from a nervous habit to a comforting ritual. "I miss her," he said simply. "But I'm glad I found you." Maxwell swallowed the lump in his throat, reaching out to place a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. "I'm glad you found me too, Lucas, more than I could ever express." The boy leaned into the touch, allowing himself to be drawn into a side hug that felt like coming home. Above them, the stars continued their eternal dance, distant witnesses to the miracle unfolding on the penthouse balcony. A father and son, separated by circumstance and reunited by chance, or perhaps by something more, some unseen hand, guiding a silver pendant back to its rightful place, bringing together a family that should never have been apart. The necklace had completed its journey, and in doing so, had begun another. The journey of two souls, learning to be family, one day at a time, under the watchful gaze of the universe and the loving memory of the woman who had connected them. 6 months later, on a warm spring evening, Maxwell stood in the doorway of Lucas's bedroom, watching his son meticulously arrange a new set of model planets on the ceiling. The room had been completely transformed from the impersonal guest suite it had once been. Now the walls were covered with a mural of the cosmos that Bernie had painted as a surprise for Lucas's 12th birthday. Bookshelves overflowed with both science texts and fantasy novels, and framed photos of Eliza shared space with new family pictures. Lucas with Maxwell at the science fair where his plant experiment had won first prize. Lucas with Uncle Randy at a baseball game. Lucas flanked by Bernie and Sunshine at his school play. The silver dragon pendant still hung around Lucas's neck, a constant reminder of the extraordinary path that had brought them together. Maxwell touched his own chest, feeling the matching pendant that Lucas had insisted he should wear again. "We can share it," the boy had declared on Christmas morning, presenting the original pendant to Maxwell in a small box while keeping the replica Randy had helped him commission. "Mom would want that." It was one of many gestures that showed Lucas's generous heart, a quality he had undoubtedly inherited from Eliza. Lucas looked up from his work, catching Maxwell watching him. "Dad?" he asked, the word still new enough to send a thrill through Maxwell's heart each time he heard it. "Do you think we could take a trip this summer? To see the real stars, not just city stars?" Maxwell nodded immediately. "Absolutely. Where would you like to go? The observatory? In Hawaii? The dark sky park in New Mexico?" Lucas's face lit up at the possibilities. "Could we do both? And maybe visit NASA too? I want to see everything." Maxwell laughed, entering the room to help his son with a particularly stubborn model of Saturn. "We can see everything," he promised. "The whole universe is yours to explore." And as they worked together, father and son beneath a ceiling of stars, Maxwell knew with absolute certainty that no business deal, no corporate triumph, no amount of wealth could ever compare to the riches he had found in the most unexpected way, through a silver pendant, a chance encounter, and the extraordinary boy who had brought meaning and joy back into his life. The necklace had found its way home, and in doing so, had led two lost souls to the same destination, a family bound not just by blood and silver, but by choice and love, and the unbreakable bonds that form when broken hearts find their missing pieces in each other. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming content. We'd love to know which part of Maxwell and Lucas's journey touched you the most. Was it their first meeting, their growing bond, or perhaps another moment? Share your thoughts in the comments below.